Welcome to M&A Mondays, the UK's first YouTube series dedicated to all things M&A. From interviews with the leading figures in the industry, to coffee chats with analysts, diversity panels, all the way through to workshops, we'll be covering it all. We do hope you enjoyed the video, and please give us a like and a follow on our social media. Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of M&A Mondays, the UK's first YouTube series dedicated to all things M&A. My name is Charlotte, and I'm a Speaker Relations Executive. And alongside me is Emerald, who's also a Speaker Relations Executive.
Today, we're very delighted to welcome another speaker for our M&A Monday series, Vasco Litchfield. Vasco is currently a Managing Director at Lazard based in London. He has been working at Lazard for almost 18 years and has rich experience with a particular focus on the support services, distribution, construction, and the building material sectors. Before joining Lazard, Vasco started his career at ING Barings after obtaining a degree from University of Bristol. We're very delighted to have you here today. So without further ado, let's get started. How are you, Vasco?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to be here in sunny London, which is a rare.
So yeah, again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us. We really appreciate it. And so our first question is, what made you decide to go into the financial industry and specifically investment banking at Lazard?
So I didn't, as I kind of told you before the recording started, I didn't pre-plan anything. I actually wanted to join the arts. Was actually thinking of becoming an actor since the age of 16, and went to Bristol. Actually, in the gap year, I was working with a Brazilian TV company, Global, out in Brazil, and then I came back to Bristol, which was strong in arts and drama, albeit strong also in economics and other pieces, and then went to Argentina to teach Shakespeare, but also started working at Lloyd's, and then met a banker from Rothschilds, and I had to do a large economics paper on Mercosur, which was the EU of Latin America at the time. It's going back a long way, by the way. And then kind of the Rothschild banker said, hey, I need some help. You speak Spanish and Portuguese, come and help us. And then I ended up going to Brazil, going to Rio, and loved the experience of M&A, working with lawyers, accountants, bankers, politicians. We were privatizing a big mining company. And I thought, wow. And then when I came back, I finished Bristol and then joined, at the time I went to the kind of milk rounds, whatever, including Rothschilds, and then joined Barings, or ING Barings at the time, and then Lazard. So it was a bit of a, it was, most people that join Lazard have a kind of predestined kind of view of the world or what they want to do. I was definitely not one of those.
Yeah, it's definitely very different from the people that we have interviewed in the past, but definitely interesting. So now as a managing director at one of the best boutique banks, investment bank in the world, and you are now a father of two, would you be able to share some secret on how you managed to reach MD and how you balance your busy life with family life?
Yeah, father of three, actually.
Wow, father of three.
There is a third. So he's three. So yeah, I've got kids of what, 11, 8, 3, boy, girl, boy. And to be honest, when I started, and because when I started banking, I didn't have a kind of natural financial background. Neither were my parents remotely interested in finance. and split parents, Brazilian mother, British dad. I did it the hard way, which was I just kind of viewed myself as a kind of Duracell battery and said, as long as I can just keep going, I'll learn and learn. So the first few years was pretty much head down. And then every year that progressed, I began to use more of the interpersonal skills. So and it kind of got better and better. It doesn't necessarily address your questions, but halfway through, I began to feel more confident with myself because I'd done so many projects. I knew where I was weak and strong and what I'd have to do, and then manage that with a family life. I think if you ask me, I think I have it balanced. I think if you ask my wife, I think she would give you a very different answer to what I view as balanced. But I've done all the nappy changing, the feeding, all those bits and pieces. But would I've liked to spend longer? I would have with the family, yes. But I just think this is, whether you are male or female, I think these are come with the job, and you just got to learn to balance that way. One of the things is trying to also, to be quite frank, slightly blessed by the job I have, and the support I have from work allowed me to get the support also to help, because my wife also works, so both of us are working parents, so we have had to invest a lot of well-earned money, but in having the support required so that we can do both. I think if I was to say where I have invested time is at work and at family, and probably the truth is at the expense of friendship. Just having to get those three balls juggling in the air, and I think that's one thing I'm trying to spend more time now as a more senior person to rekindle the kind of relationships and friendships I've had in the past.
Thank you for that. That's really interesting to hear. And yeah, again, thank you. And so now moving on to our next question. Out of all of the transactions and IPOs that you've advised on, are there any in particular that stood out to you? And could you tell us a bit about them?
Yeah, I saw that question that you posed. And the truth is, there's not one single one. And the beauty of, I guess, just to give you an insight, when you are dealing with the kind of projects we deal with, some of them are 6 months in kind of incubation, or should we say in the cooking. Some of them maybe even 2-3 years. Today I was on a project call, which I've been thinking about putting these two companies together for best part of 8 years or something. And they go together. Are they going to get married? No, they don't. They walk away, then they come back again. And then another one this year, I did one which we did in 6 weeks, and which is unheard of. Everyone thought it would be impossible to do. Then there was another one that was in working with a company that you wouldn't even know now, doesn't even exist, called SSL, which is a British company, PLC, which did shoe polish, #1 shoe polish in all of Africa, as well as owning the brand Durex condom and whatever. And so then we were doing something in Africa. All of a sudden, Reckitt Benckiser came along and wanted to buy us, and we had to defend the company. We were on the offensive. Suddenly we changed on the defensive. And ultimately it did get sold after a number of bouts and rounds to Reckitt Benckiser. But then some of the other ones I've loved is working on the privatization of, for example, the Tote, which was the sporting betting owned by the government, set up by Winston Churchill when he was treasurer before he became prime minister, and has been in government hands. And then they wanted to privatize it. And they came to us and said, would you help us negotiate how to get it out of public to private ownership? and then other things like the Royal Mail, or indeed, I remember going out to Russia in Moscow trying to sell the #1 kind of healthcare distributor, which is called 36.6, when I was a wee lad, my first kind of modeling job, put out there for 4 weeks out in Moscow 20 years ago or so, which was awesome. So each of these have been in their own little, it doesn't matter the size, some of them can be very high profile, like TUI and the tourism and merging with the German TUI. Some of them can be small, like Nicer, a small supermarket in the UK owned by the shopkeepers themselves, and you're trying to formulate a structure that will give benefit to them or create them, take them to the next level. Each one of these little projects is, has got their own little story, their own characters, their own people you either, that you get on with or you don't, or you've got to manage, and either that all falls into place very nicely, or you've got to help it get into shape, rather like kind of a corporate doctor. But I don't have one. And if I did have one, it would be that each one this year has been many more. And so each time I get excited about the new deals. And it's not all a bed of roses. There are some which are agonizingly painful. And you get battered every morning, every night I go home and I talk to my wife, said, oh my God, it's been awful. And the next morning you go back into the trenches. And then other times I come high five with the whole family and kids and say, wow, I've had a wonderful experience, met amazing entrepreneurs. So, I hope it continues that way.
Thank you so much for the answer. And I do agree. Each of them is unique in their own way. And it's good to have the mindset to always look forward to the next one as well. And the next question is, follow on really nicely about your experience that you mentioned just now. Having worked with clients or worked on transactions from multiple countries, including South Africa, Russia, Brazil, Spain, etc. How do you think the investment banking environment differs from these continents to continents? And so are certain regions more open to changes, or are certain regions more conservative? Do you mind sharing a bit more about that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, let's not forget, Lazard's been around, over 150 years, 160 years. So the concept of the trusted advisor has been around a very long time. Even, you probably forgive me, but even in Italy, in mafia circles, watching The Godfather, you have the consigliere, which is the guy that sits in the background, helping the family maneuver in a way, albeit I hope we're not doing any mafia style things, but in the way I quite like viewing myself as a consigliere, the guy in the background helping, whether that's an Italian family, a Brazilian family, a Chinese family, a Russian, business, or an American private equity firm. The beauty of what we do and why it's stayed so many years, I think, and actually when it comes to technology, why it hasn't really changed, is that I think everyone wants a trusted advisor who's done this for many, many years and knows the pitfalls. I mean, to do an M&A transaction, whether you're in China, Brazil, the UK, in a similar way, you are dealing with stakeholders, and one selling and one buying, different regulatory requirements, etc. But you're still having to get a bunch of people on either side closer together to eventually come to an agreement. Sometimes they walk away and it's all fires and shouting at each other. And my job is to try and make sure that everyone sees the different ways of looking at it and bringing people together. Whether that's an M&A deal, whether that's a restructuring, which is then you're dealing with the survival of a company, which also can be super interesting. And one of the things we do a lot at Lazard, it's not just M&A or IPO, it's actually restructuring a business so it survives and becomes stronger out of the recession. One I would say is probably that different countries have a different connotation of what that trusted advisor is. So maybe people think in very mercantile views, I'm only coming in here for a project, a fee, and I walk away and I'm not really that interested. To be quite frank, the Lazard of 160 years is because we've had clients that come back and we are capable and independent enough to say it doesn't work. This is not in the best interest of the family or the company. And you gain their trust. And then when they next time they come, they will say, I trusted that guy, I'll come back again. I think there is suspicion in some countries that we are kind of sharks and only after the latest deal, right? And that, but that is purely because we haven't got the relationship with them. They've been burnt with somebody else, etc. And so it's a cognizant on Lazard or myself or a partner to build that trust, whether that's myself and my Chinese partner or myself, my Brazilian partner or American, it doesn't matter. But we must do that to gain their trust. But ultimately, I think the human instinct is still to have people they trust beside them for really difficult situations, for making choices, which could, if it's a family selling their business, that's a once in a generation or more multi-generations time they're going to do that, or a CEO about to do a major deal in a new country, he or she could fall or fly under that judgment, and have people around him or her to help them through that, navigate them. I think it's multi-jurisdictional. I just think we need to get the right people.
Thank you so much for such an insightful response. And now moving on to our next question. We noticed that you have a particular focus on the support services, distribution, construction, and the building materials sector. Many of our audiences are aspiring investment bankers and want to know how to choose the right team or division for themselves. So could you share with us how you found your focus and what is special about these fields?
Yeah, sure, I will. But my answer would be how I fell into Lazard and investment banking, which is maybe something more on me than anything else. I'll be perfectly frank with you. I kind of never thought I would be in such sexy sectors as building materials, but that's what I'm kind of known as in Europe for. But the truth is, I was a wee lad when I came to Lazard, and 6 months in, they put me on a sell side. So this was an asset in Finland, and called Paroc, which is insulation. So Charlotte or Errol, around you, you've got insulation on those walls around you, which is good for energy and efficient, green efficiency. And these were one of the largest manufacturers in Europe at it, using volcanic rock. And I was told to read up. No one at Lazard knew a clue about this. So I spent the week and a weekend reading up about the sector. We then went and pitched. We didn't really know very well at all. I flew out to Finland. That was quite interesting, in deepest, darkest winter, which if you go to Finland in deepest, darkest winter, is it's very cold, bloody cold. And then, believe it or not, we then won the pitch. And the senior guy on the project said, wow, you seem to know an awful lot about this, so you're going to be the main man. This is after a week of reading about it. And then they, I got to know all the buyers. And there was a lot of interesting people from all over the place. The Knauf family in Germany, Owens Corning in the US, and Kingfisher and Kingspan and various others. Anyway, I then began a relationship with all these, and then from there I then started working and doing projects with all of them, and kind of never looked back. So the motto of the story is I rather like how I fell into investment bank. I'm one of these that constantly looks at what's happening and what's interesting, and just if I meet an interesting person, I kind of want to develop it, and all I can encourage people to do. And I'm not sure whether you could really do it in one of the bigger firms, but Lazard is of a size, it's kind of international. It's large, but it's also quite small in the same way. We're a small number of partners and people, and therefore it does give me the ability to be slightly more entrepreneurial, as long as I deliver. I have to deliver, but it does allow me to then follow a little bit where I think interesting companies, interesting people, which is what I love. And then because that makes me get out of bed happy and not moody. And the more times I get out of bed happy, I'm going to do a good job, basically. And so I didn't necessarily fixate on that. I kind of just, it fell, and then I used those relationships to grow and flourish. And from there, those people have gone elsewhere, and I followed them into not necessarily the same sectors, different sectors. But what it goes back to is that trust, that those people have come back to Lazard and ideally back to trying to working with me, because they trust that I'll give decent advice.
Thank you very much. And I think our viewers will definitely also benefit from hearing what you mentioned. This level of flexibility and just let it flow naturally definitely is a way of finding the eventual sector for you as well. And so the next question is, after decades of working in this sector, how do you think the industry has changed?
And one of the answers is and actually went to a few years ago, they showed, we had all the Lazard partners, and we've got some amazing brains, both from politics, academics, and bankers. And they showed us slides of, this was a presentation 20 years ago of Lazard, and this is a presentation today. And the reality is, the numbers, the DCF or the LBO or the comparable companies, we were doing this 30, 40 years ago. Nothing really fundamentally has changed. And you look at other sectors that have fundamentally changed. We as a sector, it goes back to, there's not been a huge innovation. It's the people, in the intellectual capacity of the people, the relationships and stakeholders. I do think it's easier what we're doing now on screen. And some people are more apt at that, and some less. Some people are really dead keen on the physical, but the reality is, it goes back to what I've been saying, I think, through this whole kind of interview, that trust element is built, is something that is not, there is science, there is some science to it, because you can't bullshit, you will be found out. You've got to really feel comfortable in what you do. And as I've matured, I have felt more and more comfortable. And still, if I do something that I don't understand, the beauty is I have my partners that are far intellectually much more capable than I am, for me to seek the right advice. And then for me to effectively, I think my job, partly because of so many databases, so much information is spread, is actually to simplify things, to make it simple for everyone to be able to reach a conclusion. Because actually what you could do, I could spout all these different names, all these different algorithms for this or for that, etc., and you get completely lost from the weed, and the boards that I'm advising will be completely lost. And actually what they need is really straightforward advice, which actually has been going on for 160 years at Lazard, just with much more technology around it. But ultimately it still comes down to, what's the right thing? Do you push forward and accelerate a negotiation? Do you actually be nicer to people? Do you offer a carrot? Do you offer a stick? Bringing people together? Do you frighten people? Even sometimes I need to frighten my own clients to make a move, because I think it's the best interest to get a transaction which I believe merits to be done, because net it benefits everyone. And those are things, and those are judgment calls. Obviously, there's hundreds of analysis. We could do pages and pages and books of 300 pages, but ultimately I've got to get down to, and I tell everyone, I need to get down to 5 pages of what's the right advice. If we can't do it, then we're not helping our client, who need clarity of thought and to make a super important decision. And sometimes you can spend hours and hours and hours, days and days and days, but that decision will be probably done in half an hour of discussion. Don't know if that's helpful or not.
No, it's definitely helpful. I mean, definitely gives some different perspectives. I mean, usually every time you hear about different industries, you always hear about everything changing constantly. So it's quite interesting to hear about
now,
how
the industry. So our different industries are constantly changing, right? Yeah. The technology or imagine now in the industrials, the car industry, and all those bits and all the auto parts that go into a car, everything is changing. Energy, everything is changing. But the ultimate advice that we as Lazard give for our client of restructuring, selling, doing an IPO, buying, what price they should buy for, etc. Obviously, all those ingredients need to feed in. You need to understand the dynamics of the industry and the individuals involved. But the ultimate advice has been going on for, well, more than 160 years. And it goes back to the same fundamentals. Those fundamentals grow and grow and grow and grow, but ultimately come down to the same ingredients, and it's you being able to understand everything around and then distilling it into its nucleus.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you again for that really clear explanation. I think a lot of our viewers can really make use of that. And now we're actually on to our last question. And so the question is, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? And can you also give the students watching this interview some advice on how to enter and succeed in this industry?
Yeah, there are probably two spectrums of people. At Lazard, I kind of try and coach the younger guys. You know, you've got my spectrum, which is slightly surf the wave, super enthusiastic, will look and do everything when I was younger, and just wanted to learn and still just want to learn, and just think everyone around me is just brilliant. And I'm so lucky to be here, and I'll just do whatever I can. And as long as I like the people I'm working with, I will go that extra mile. But I don't necessarily have a kind of a list and a structure of which I'm going. I kind of, just keep sniffing for new relationships and seeing and building, and then trying to build on that. And whereas you've got the other spectrum, which is people very much structured, very much disciplined. And the reality is you probably need a bit of both, especially in M&A or kind of investment banking, because there is an element of entrepreneurialism as you go up. To begin with, as kind of I always say to the graduates who join Lazard, I kind of give this analogy of you're on a battlefield and you need your armor. And I'm only willing to put my analysts onto the battlefield in front of kind of people once I feel they've got enough armor, which is the experience, which is having done the modeling, having had the experience here and there. And once you build up the armor, then I think, okay, you are prepared to go into battle. Let's go together. And I think, so there needs to be an element of making sure you go through the steps. And as I told you, I wasn't, there were people who joined who were much more finance focused than I was. What I had was, I just said, okay, I'm going to put that Duracell battery and just keep going, keep outlasting, working the hardest, latest, and learning as much as I can through that. And then once I reached a level that I found I had enough armor, then I then accelerated. And I think one of the things I would give advice is, don't be something you're not. Work out what it is that you feel comfortable. Don't try and be something because you have to be, because actually, and I think the most important thing is enjoy what you do. If you don't enjoy what you do, this job is pretty hard. It's not a good job to join if you don't enjoy what you're doing. If you enjoy what you're doing, I'm not, there are few jobs that are better in my mind, where you get to meet, you're in the mix of politics, legal, numbers, financial markets, countries. It plays emotions, EQ with IQ, all these together, and you're in the middle of this, putting this chemistry together to see whether it can produce something even more spectacular. That for me is why I'm still doing this. But I think for me is be comfortable in your own shoes, enjoy what you do, because it's teamwork what we do here. We don't win on individuals at Lazard. We win, I can't speak for other banks, but it's teamwork. And if everyone is together and has the same energy, the client feels it, everyone in the team feels it, and it's a winning formula. If you're not in sync and enjoying it, it can be really hard and actually not enjoyable at all. So those would be the things. And also when you choose I've always told people is, and I did it myself, I chose, don't forget, I had no real background, so I didn't know which place to choose. I chose it on the people. Now, in some large institutions, probably you go into a machine and you don't quite know the people who interviewed you. Will you actually end up working with them? The nice thing about Lazard is it's not that many. So we're on 2 floors and we're all open planned, as you saw. I can, you more or less get a sense. We all sit around a room, all the partners at Lazard in London. So it tells you, the room isn't particularly big. So we all get a sense of the people, and I work generally with most. So I would veer on the people side, and don't forget, ultimately, M&A as you climb up becomes more and more of a people business because it's based on trust. So there's a bit of roundabout way of answering your question, but I think they are important factors. At least my philosophy of, and I'm not sure it's everyone's philosophy.
Thank you for that. And that was actually all of our questions. And so again, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure all viewers can really learn a lot from your experiences and your stories. I personally found them incredibly insightful. And yeah, for those watching, we hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the M&A Mondays series. And please make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.
Thank you.